So here's a revelation that's allowed me to avoid, or as I like to call it, win, probably about 10 or 15 fights over the years, since I was a young man through to my old age right now. I'll start with a story though. So I was about 18 years old. I was a big guy, strong guy. I'd been training really hard in martial arts for 3 or 4 years. I could throw a hell of a punch. And I was downtown with some friends. This was in Toronto, actually, at Yonge and Dundas. So a pretty big intersection. I'm hanging out there, and there's this homeless guy, this fatter, older guy, big beard, this shabby old winter coat that's just falling off of his body in the middle of summer, sort of shambles up to me, stands right in front of me about 2 feet away, looks me in the eyes, and then in rather explicit detail, completely out of nowhere, starts going through the sexual acts that he would like me to perform on him. And I just instantly pushed him in the chest, the old football push, and I got my fist up, and I was gonna drift him. I was just gonna punch his head off, and I would have punched his head off. And it would have been a very, very lopsided fight. And then I don't know where I found the maturity at that young age, but all of a sudden I go, man, this guy's gotta be mentally ill. This guy's gotta be crazy. And when you think about it, he had to be crazy. He's going to somebody who's taller than him, much bigger than him, much stronger than him, and asking something that's almost guaranteed to create a really defensive reaction, especially on the part of a young kid who doesn't know any better. So the fact that this is so incongruous, the fact that he's asking this so much out of context, the fact that it's crazy to ask this, stopped me from hitting him. And this got me thinking. It got me thinking about mental illness and the number of fights that come purely out of mental illness. And it turns out that it's a very, very rough rule of thumb. About 1 in 10 people in our society is mentally ill. If you change the definitions, if you include depression, maybe it's higher than that. If you use a more stringent definition, and you're only including certain types of mental illness, maybe it's lower than that, but it doesn't matter. Just a certain percentage of people, and for easy math, call it 1 in 10, are not well in the head. Maybe they're normal most of the time, but they're off their lithium this week. Maybe they're normal most of the time, but they stopped taking other medications. They stopped doing, seeing the therapist. They had a really, really bad weekend. Functionally, they're mentally ill. So they're not in the business of evaluating what their actions are going to, how their actions are going to be absorbed and reacted to by normal people in society, because they're not able to weigh these things. So the next time you get cut off by some driver who, cuts you off, yells at you, gives you the finger, drives by, yeah, maybe the guy's an asshole. It's quite reasonable to assume that he's an asshole, but maybe some stockbroker who's held it together for years because he's a low dose of some kind of medication and he's not taking it anymore. Maybe it's somebody who's just had some kind of psychotic break. Maybe it's somebody who runs around doing this kind of stuff all the time. You don't know. It's like that cheesy New Age saying that everybody you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. That's true, and it's especially true for people who are doing just outrageous things that are guaranteed to make people upset. So keep in mind 2 things. Number 1, a basic level of compassion. A basic level of compassion for people who are not well in the head and you don't know. If somebody's in your face and bothering you, there's a higher than average chance that they're not well in the head, that they're essentially an automata controlled by bad brain biochemistry, by terrible genetics, by doing way too many drugs at some point, by not doing enough drugs, whatever. So we need to have some compassion for people who are not right in the head. And if that doesn't move you, how about the legal aspects? How about the fact that if I had punched that homeless guy in the face, knocked him out, and he'd fallen, he'd hit his head on the pavement and split his head open and died, that would have instantly changed my life. That would have changed my life with 1 second of rage and 1 second of punching, and my life would be forever changed. I would have been in touch with the criminal justice system. I would have been on the run for the rest of my life. I would have carried the guilt of hitting that guy who was, as I said, mentally ill for the rest of my life. It would have been a life-changing event. So keep those 2 things in mind. Number 1, compassion. Number 2, the legal consequences. Any kind of confrontation is potentially really dangerous. I'm not saying don't defend yourself. Of course I'm saying defend yourself. But if you have a choice of de-escalating a situation, either by verbally de-escalating it or just by completely ignoring it and letting the other person carry on and hopefully get back in touch with a social worker, that is by far the better option. It's better for you, it's better for them, it's better for the people that know you, it's better for your kids, it's better for your parents that you are not little Jimmy who just killed a guy. This kind of accidental death after a consensual fight, even a consensual fight, is still manslaughter. There are people spending decades in jail for drunken consensual fights outside a bar. They had agreed to fight, but one of them can't give the other guy permission to kill him. So when he got punched, and when he fell, and when his head landed on the planter and split in half, and was permanently brain injured or dead, you know, you're still going to jail. That's still manslaughter. So this idea that about 1 in 10 people that you run into are mentally ill is a really good moderating lens to look at the world through. It may not be sexy. There's this culture around, especially in the martial arts, about, yeah, my instructor's had 35 street fights. Well, I'm going to tell you, if he's had 35 street fights, he's either an alcoholic or a total asshole. We all want to kind of rack up your street fights. It's totally stupid. Way better to rack up your fights in the gym. Way better to rack up your rounds of sparring. If you've done 200, 300, 400, 500 rounds of sparring, that's infinitely more experience than 1 or 2 fights where you beat the crap out of some guy who should really ultimately have been on lithium.